Welcome to this podcast is Uncalled For. On today's edition, Tim Crippen. And now, your host for this podcast, Mike Chernevsky.
If you're familiar with the Winning Side Coaches podcast, you may know today's guest. He was one of my co-hosts on the Winning Side Coaches. In fact, probably the longest tenured of the many hosts that I've had on that podcast. And we actually first met working for a little company called Silpada Designs. Think Tupperware parties, but with sterling silver jewelry. The company sadly no longer exists, but that's where my guest and I first met. We worked together, found out we were sports fans, and when the time came for me to get Winning Side Coaches started, he was one of the first people to talk with me, and the rest, as I say, is history. So please welcome Tim Crippen to the podcast. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Mike, for inviting me here.
So, let's start our conversation with Silpada Designs.
Yeah.
Because that's where we first met.
Yeah, that's where we first met. We were at Silpada Designs. It was a sterling silver jewelry company started up by two women out there. We were both kind of working in the warehouse area. I was just barely getting started. Well, when they first started out, I was one of those guys who did the scanning, with the jewelry and stuff, and it was fine. And then eventually, I worked in the maintenance department after about a little over a year, and I stayed there for about almost 5.5 years. About the longest I've ever stayed with anybody. It was a neat experience learning kind of the small business aspects of it. But at that time, it was time for me to move on to bigger and better things. But for my short period of time, some of the people that I met up there with you, Daniel, Lucas, a whole bunch of others that I could mention, were really great folks, and I had a very impressive time out there.
Yeah. I, too, of course, started in fulfillment, doing all the scanning the jewelry, packing it up, and everything. And then they had the bright idea of moving me to stocking. I did fairly well. I think I did better as a stocker than I did in fulfillment, and then transitioned to more materials stocking. For our listeners who have no idea what I'm talking about, materials is the step in between the stuff actually coming in and the stuff going out, which is fulfillment. It's basically just storing everything, getting it ready for the fulfillment folks to pick it up. Everything, and that's where Luke and Daniel worked as well as our forklift drivers. And I've asked Luke to be on the podcast. He's open to it.
Yeah.
Just a matter of getting him scheduled.
Yeah. I just saw Luke not too long ago at the Planet Comic-Con. He seemed to be doing pretty good. Just chatted for a little bit. I was even really nice to him when I was out there because I had a little extra money that my brother had gave me to the Majestic restaurant, and there was some left over, and I told him, I said, hey, look, if you want to use this money up for, I said, here's such and such amount of money on the restaurant. You guys want to go out to eat? It's on me. So I gave him the gift card and stuff like that. And I think Luke was just kind of stunned that I gave him, that for. But I just felt like, hey, I already went there earlier this year with the restaurant week, and I tried, and it was good. And it was good food, But the extra money, I figured I give it to somebody who probably doesn't go out to any place fancy, for a restaurant like that, And I figured, why not, So hopefully Luke got a chance to use that gift card up, and had some fun with it.
Of course, I have connections to the Majestic Steakhouse. I've shot film scenes there, for example, and I believe Clint's back working there.
Yeah, I like the one unique thing about it is that they kept, if you go to the downstairs area of that restaurant, they still have like that old style bar saloon out there, which I really like. It was kind of neat, and that's where I kind of hung out most of the time. But during our nightlies, they have like a live band out there, mostly kind of like a jazz band. They have a piano, drummer, maybe a bass guitarist, playing out there. And I went out there. It was just a fun, kind of relaxing time. I thought, dang, this is one of those places that is kind of like a hidden gem that not too many people really talk about. But if you've never been there, if you live in the Kansas City area, that's one restaurant you have to at least try at least once. Just to say that okay, you've been there. I liked it. Two thumbs up for me. I mean, I had like a filet mignon out there, which normally I wouldn't have steak, because it was so pricey. But like I said, it was restaurant week. It was a combo deal, and I loved every minute of that old style bar saloon.
That downstairs thing you were talking about, that's where we shot the film scenes. What are some things you remember about working at Silpada, either as fulfillment or as building maintenance?
Oh, let's see. Someone says, I remember that elevator not working a lot of times. From the upstairs part where mostly like upper management, was located at, to the downstairs where the warehouse stuff. And anytime when you were taking trash or anything like that, or you needing to have to go upstairs, that elevator sometimes would work and sometimes it didn't. And so you had to be creative. And I remember one time, I will never forget this. There's a front area where most everybody usually comes in. Most of the employees, not the upper management, but most of the employees come in at the front entrance, and you had to have a choice to to getting out there. Well, one day the elevator wasn't really working that well, so you had to be the most creative on getting things done. So luckily for us, we had one of those like small carts. We had to do the trash thing. So what we did was we leave the bigger trash can down here at the bottom, and we would take the smaller trash. What we do is once we get everything taken care of from the upstairs stuff, we just throw it from over the top. When the elevator wasn't really working. But we made some creative deals working with it.
We should have the disclaimer: do not try this at home.
Yeah. And then Ed Jones was really good guy. Work with Dennis Patterson. Out of all the bosses that I've ever worked for in my entire life, by far the nicest boss I've ever worked for. I mean, treated me with respect. Gave me all the deep respect. I remember probably the one particular day, and I will never forget this particular day. The one particular time I remember when my dad had passed away, I remember that was one of the more hardest parts for me, and I was off for that whole week, for the funeral and time. And it was like the week, I think it was the week before the week of the big sale that we had always going on back in July,
Oh yeah.
And That's always the toughest part, because you're either getting yourself prepared for cleaning, you're either helping out at the national convention, the jewelry thing that they had going on for that time in July, which was usually at Bartle Hall. Mm-hmm. And it was the week before, and it happened the week before that week, so for me, I was going through so many emotions at that time, because I was not really thinking so much about work, I just lost my dad, and stuff, and I was just trying to just keep everything in check. But I got through that whole week and went through that whole time. Luckily for me, I'd already scheduled for a vacation after that, because a lot of people do that, after that convention. They'll schedule a vacation time so they can just try to recover from it. But I had scheduled a week off for vacation, and at that time, I really, really needed it, because I was, like I said, I was going through emotions that I just couldn't just imagine. So after we got done with the convention thing, I remember I went on to a trip out there to Yellowstone and went on one more better vacations. I've been there and stuff like that. My mom went on another separate vacation to visit my brother at the Smoky Mountains. So we were both in national parks, But at the time, it was just mostly a lot of reflection, but a time to recover. But here was the interesting part. The Monday when I got back from vacation, I remember Dennis coming up to me. And Dennis hands me this thing in the envelope, and it says, "What's this?" He said, just open it. You'll eventually get to it. So I was still taking care of my duties, like I did a little bit in the morning hour. Finally, then I had some time. I went into like a little secret place. I won't say where it was at, but a secret place to look at what was inside the envelope. Mike, I was totally stunned and blown away because at that time, they had sold the company to Avon at the time, and all the employees received a check, from the owners. And it varied depending upon how many years you've been there. I probably had gone through maybe 2, maybe 3 years. And all of a sudden, I saw this check this was no joke, my biggest check I've ever seen in one full check for $2,500.
Wow.
And I was totally stunned. And I had tears crying. I mean, you had no idea how the emotional thing would go, because I just even had to fix my car, at the time, too. I thought, this couldn't have come, at a more better time for me. And I always felt like, with that group, I felt like I was always there for family for me. And so that's why I stayed for as long as I did, because I really originally wanted to leave earlier, but at the time, my dad was going through the cancer situation, and I couldn't do it at the time. But now I am so grateful that I did stay for as long as I did and moved on. It wasn't real pretty after I left, because I was still going through the struggles, but now I've moved on to a different thing. I've been now starting at the Goodyear plant, in Topeka, and I'm almost been there for close to 5 years now, in October. So for me, this has been like the best move from financial standpoint, from a benefit standpoint, and just overall, just life experience, in general. I mean, I'm finally able to get to do some things in my life that I've always wanted to do. I mean, if you told me like I was going to be able to do an Alaskan cruise, 10 years ago, I would have laughed and said, I can't even afford to even go on a cruise, let alone even try to do an Alaskan cruise. So, I mean, but my time with Silpada, it was a great time. But like I said, I mean, it's one that you move on from, and that was my enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I don't recall getting one of those checks, but then again, about that time you're talking about, that's when they fired me.
Yeah.
We won't go into details on that. So yeah, I was just thinking about this week. Bow job. That was part of my Silpada experience, and I know it sounds dirty, but it really isn't. It's just a materials thing. Sometimes materials would get all mixed up and everything. And a bow job, so named because the head of fulfillment stocking was named Bo.
Bo, yeah. I remember Bo, yeah.
He would just ask us, hey, could you get this all cleaned up and everything? That's where the forklift guys came in, Luke and Dan. That took up a good chunk of time, really, just getting that all squared away. Everything, just make sure it's all in the FIFO. Or first in, first out for anyone not familiar with inventory. And make sure you have the older stuff goes first, and so on and so forth. And then they moved to the newer warehouse across the street. So I had my issues with that warehouse, but at least we didn't have to deal with bow jobs anymore. Yeah. So, and also fantasy football and tournament pools. I know we both still participate in those.
Yeah, still participate. We did have like a little bit of a break, I don't know, for at least about 2, maybe 3 years for a while, and then we finally got ourselves back to playing it again, because we try to go back to the original rules that what we stated on, and we're still playing it. We're still playing it now. I won this last year, on the championship. I think this is like my either second or third time that I've won the championship. I don't win it too often, but when I do, it's a good feeling. And the only reason why I won the championship this year was because a lot of the players that my opponent happened to have at the championship game were all resting on the last week, on week 7, because they had already clinched their division title or playoff spots, So I was like, I'm sitting pretty. I'll leave it at that. But that's the thing. It's a strategy because you got to look at everything. When you're playing the fantasy football. But it's just in good fun on competition. There's no money involved or anything like that. And I love that aspect of it. And I mean, there's no. Well, let's just say there isn't really any there's maybe some small taunting, but not really major bad taunting.
Yeah, we try. I've been commissioner the last couple of years, so it's one of those things you just try to keep the peace and everything. Which brings us to the podcast that we did, the Wingside Coaches. I managed to keep that thing running 250 episodes. That's quite a feat.
Yeah.
Whether it's some combination of you and some of the other guest hosts I've had.
Yeah.
And we only managed one interview the whole time.
Yeah. It was trying to even find an interview was just tough. I remember trying to get an interview with an ESPN personality only because my roommate had a connection because she's the niece, of. But you had to go through agents and everything involved in the deal. And sometimes they'll do it for free because they'll work with the agent, and sometimes they want to be paid, as guests, later on as well. Too, it just depends, on the agent. But overall, it's I didn't have anything regretful. I was just glad to at least be able to just try to get one interview, at the most of it. But our interview that we had was with Jim Chappell. Great guy, and not too long ago he had just recently sold his sports bar restaurant to a firm out there, and the only thing he asked out of the firm is that all the artifacts would still stay in the which I thought good, because that's what makes that place Chappell's is what the name of the place is. What makes that restaurant very unique is because of all the artifacts, that are in there. The food was good. I mean, it wasn't spectacular or anything, but the food was good. But the artifacts is what you go there for. You're looking, oh my goodness! I feel like I'm in sports heaven, when I'm out there.
For those of you who haven't been to Chapel's Sports Museum and Restaurants in North KC, it's huge. For one, the walls are covered in sports artifacts from dating back at least the 50s and everything. The overhead and the ceiling, they got all sorts of football helmets, pros, college, some high school. And Jim has one of the Oakland A's World Series trophies.
Yeah. It's not the actual one, but it's a replica of it, because each thing, whether it's be athletes or ownerships or something like that, happens to get a trophy, of winning like a championship, and he happens to get one of those things because he asked for permission, for it, and guess what? He's got one of those trophies, and it's actually freaking nice. When you're looking at something like that on the World Series trophies. With me, I went out there to Kauffman. I've been to Kauffman Stadium multiple times, and just recently with the Royals winning the World Series championship, I go back into that Royals Hall of Fame, and you look at the trophies from the '85 one to the 2015, and they're completely different. How the style is, and I was like, wow. I mean, they still got that Ring of Honor and stuff like that, but what's changed a little bit is that from the old one, they used to have the two teams that were playing the World Series down the bottom, their logos right there at the bottom. This one, the newer ones, they don't even have that, so it's a different, unique perspective. But if you've never been, if you're a sports fan or a sports history buff, that's definitely a place here in Kansas City that you have to go out and try, and you'd be very impressed with. With like the Wingside Coaches, we've been to like different places for shooting and doing the recording stuff, and like last night, well, not last night, the Saturday night, I went out there to the Silverstein I Arena to go see a concert.
Yeah.
And I drove back in there and I looked, and I couldn't believe it. One of our spots that we did our recording, the Wendy's, there is completely closed. And my first reaction was like, how in the world is a Wendy's closed? This is where a lot of traffic, comes into the area. It's like, I mean, it was like boarded up, I mean, everything was in there. It's like, how in the world Wendy's closed? But it is what it is. But I mean, that's not the only place that's ever closed. You know, when we've done that places that we've done our podcast before, and previous that have closed before in the past. You know, and you've probably got a whole list of them. You know.
Well, we're staying in one of those places right now. So.
Yeah.
Bots a game.
So again, this interview put together, getting the materials put together, we're going, we punished each other for bad picks. We called them Batsu games because Batsu, punishment in Japanese, and that's a staple of Japanese comedy, and others have been doing. Dan Patrick had been doing it on his show with his Motley Crew thing. Throwing dodgeballs at one another, and I thought, we could do this, and I think I got most of the punishments.
Most of it. I still got my share, you know, as well. But you definitely. Let's just say this much: with your punishments, you know, you got a pretty good. Particularly, always a lot of those on the NCAA tournaments. You really now. I'm going to go out and say this now. For years, this always just drove me nuts. I've never said this to you before, but this always drove me nuts during the NCAA tournament, that every single freaking year, you always pick Duke to win the championship. But this year, you actually changed it up for the... And when I saw that, you know, when you made the changes, you know, through Facebook on social media and who your picks were, and then you picked on somebody, I thought to myself, finally... He finally went outside the box for a change. I thought I would never see the day when he would finally get outside the championship and not having to pick Duke all the freaking time. You know, it's like he finally did something right, you know. But needless to say, my picks, you know, I never got any of the Final Four picks, you know. All right. I mean, this year, was more of a redemption story because Virginia, of all the teams that I thought would get, I had them at least going to regional finals. Mm-hmm. But if you told me that they would win the whole thing, I still would have laughed because I would have said, look what happened last year. They first team to lose to a 16 seed, you know, and all of a sudden win the championship the next year. You don't even write a Hollywood script, you know, for something like that.
I believe I picked Gonzaga this year.
Yeah, and Gonzaga had a great season, but I think if I remember, they lost to the regional semifinals. I think so. I think I had Gonzaga, you know, picked to at least get to the Final Four, and that didn't help me on that one either.
The bigger miracle is if I were ever to pick the Chicken Hawks to win it.
No, I know. In real life that would never happen. Yeah. I was just glad to finally see for a change that you picked somebody outside of Duke. For a change, it's like finally he's thinking outside of the box for a change, you know. So I was glad to see something like that. But only reason why I think I had Gonzaga at least getting as far as they did on the Final Four was just because I saw what they did to Duke back around close to Thanksgiving time when they were in Hawaii, and what they just absolutely destroyed them. I thought, dang, Gonzaga's for real, you know. So, and I thought they would keep that up, and they did for most of the time. But once you in that tournament, once you get to the Sweet 16, your competition gets tougher and tougher, and you're starting to realize, okay, you're either going to keep this thing going on, or you're just going to go right out. And that happened. But no, fun times on the podcast, you know.
Do you remember what your favorite punishment towards me was?
Oh yes, absolutely. I will never forget it.
Yeah. Well, you know,
For your punishment on this, let me just say this. I told you at the beginning of the season the team would try to go after and win the division. Now, they still have a shot, but more unlikely is going. I adjusted to it, on the process, and because at the time, because I thought this team wasn't either getting a big bat, they weren't even getting a pitcher, and even when the trade deadline passed, guess what? They still didn't even do it. I mean, you're just thinking, okay, is this team really for real? When I really thought when the team was for real was when Oakland and San Francisco came for a homestand back-to-back, for 7 games. And when they took, out of the 7 games, 6 out of 7 for San Francisco and Oakland, I thought, okay, this team
might be for real.
This team might be for real, and this team will have a shot. And okay, I understand for the division, for Detroit. I get it, because they've won it 3 years in a row. I get that part. But you didn't even give them a chance for a wild card spot. Oh, just a wild card spot, And if you were watching the celebration last night, I saw George Brett excited. I saw Dayton Moore, the general manager, excited. I saw young players who weren't even born when the last time they were in the World Series getting excited about the team. And finally we have something to celebrate. But since you did a little bit less on your picks, and you do have to be punished for this. I was able to find this at the store this week. Originally, we had talked about you painting the nails and stuff, with the Kansas City Royals logo. I decided not to do that because I did happen to see some temporary nail thing with the logos on it. But I decided not to do that because I thought, because they just didn't shine out as quite as what I like to. So what I did was I got these temporary tattoos with the Kansas City Royals logos. They've got different ones with the cap. And there's even one with the mascot with Slugger on it, on there, that you either have to put on your arms for the rest of the night, including at the hockey game, on your arms and a couple on your cheeks, just because I'm embarrassing you so much because you didn't pick the Royals once during the entire season. Now, it'll give you instructions on how to do it. They're just temporary tattoos. They're not permanent ones, just to let you know, because you can be washable and stuff. I wish I would have been able to find these in a Cracker Jack box, but I don't think Cracker Jack makes a big enough box to make tattoos. It was the East size,
These are pretty big tattoos.
So this is your punishment, for the box. So one on each arm and one on each cheek. Yeah.
One sheet of 7 tattoos.
Yeah.
All right. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Good job, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay. It was the time when the Royals first got into the playoffs in 29 years, back in 2014. And I was so freaking happy for that time because as a diehard fan, I waited for so freaking long. And I remember Ray Domino was with us, and we were down in Crown Center, doing the podcast at the time because we were getting ready for the hockey game, for that night.
Blues and Stars, excuse me.
Yeah, Blues and Stars for that game. We walked all the way, out there to the game. We didn't take our vehicles out there. We were already parked at Crown Center. We just figured we'd just walk to the game. It was just down the street. It wasn't that far. And I remember going out there to the game, and we were doing the podcast. I remember you getting the temporary tattoos that I had set up for you. And you see this sheet of terror, and I've never seen you laugh so hard on it because I don't know if you were laughing because you saw the sheet of the temporary tattoos, or you were just laughing because you were just thinking, I can't believe he's gonna make me put these things on my shoulder, the hands, a little bit of everything, I mean. But I think we were, but it was just all in just an overall just good time to me. That is always going to still be my favorite one because just as a fan, it's like I finally see myself justified on that. So yeah, that was my favorite moment, for the podcast.
Now, my favorite Batsu game for you happened a little earlier, and yes, Ray was involved with this one too, and yeah, that place did close down, became a ramen shop.
And one more thing, hockey, our Missouri Mavericks from dear old Independence, Missouri, are now in first place in Central Hockey League for the first time.
Fuji!
It was, I forget what I was punishing you for, but it was 4 words. Mount Fuji Jetpack.
Yeah, Mount Fuji Jetpack, yeah.
Ray was talking about something hockey related, and you just yelling, Fuji!
Fuji, yeah, oh yeah, just out of the blue, out of the thing. So, I think if I remember right, I think the Winter Olympics were going on at that time too. So I think the U.S. hockey team was playing a game. They might have even won the previous day. I don't remember, but I remember there was a lot of hockey discussion, involved in that.
Yeah,
day.
Ray was big, certainly knowledgeable about hockey. And everything. I do recall one of our discussions was about the original 6 and the expansion 6. And, and here we are. We have a Stanley Cup final now between an original 6 team and an expansion 6 team. Boston and St. Louis.
A rematch from 49 years ago. Yeah. I mean, of course, nobody will remember other than the real long-hard, die-hard fans. But St. Louis Blues versus the Boston Bruins for Stanley. That starts tonight, no less. So that'll be real fun. I would love to go to a Stanley Cup final game, and I checked on a third-party site. What? This was no joke. The cheapest tickets that I could find to go to St. Louis to actually go see that game, and sitting in the cheap seats was like somewhere between $800 and $900, for a game. And even the lower levels weren't that bad for a lower level price. It was like $1,200 to $1,400. And I remember telling my coworker, I said, if you try to compare it, to some of the other championships with the major sports, that's really not a bad price, for going to a Stanley Cup final compared to, like, say, go to a Super Bowl or to a World Series or something like that, because they were just way, way outrageous. But for $1,200 to $1,400 and the lower level seats for a Stanley Cup final game, if I had the money, sign me up. I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Yep. Especially if St. Louis is one of the participants. Just get on the highway out to St. Louis, 4-hour drive, and
If I had the decent amount of money, for it, I would have made the drive to St. Louis this Saturday night to go out there again. But I would have said to myself, okay, the tickets was one thing, but probably finding a hotel in that downtown St. Louis would have been just awful, just to go get through, because how these hotels, there's a major event. Your prices will get
I worked in hotel security and have spent many nights in those St. Louis downtown hotels, so I know exactly what you're talking about on both fronts. Yeah, not just you. We've had a number of co-hosts. You mentioned Ray. That Jeff, who only came on a couple of times. We talked soccer, promotion, relegation. We had our late friend Ryan Lundy. Yeah. Passed away way too soon.
I got to meet Ryan one time. Seemed like a really nice guy.
Yeah. Keith, the last host I had, good guy, just really hard to schedule. So all in all, you guys helped me out a great deal. All of you, and can't thank you enough.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I think it was close to 3.5 years did that show, and believe me, those were actually some of the most memorable times I had, because I was going through transitions from different places at work at the time before I got the job at Goodyear. To me, it was always fun discussing different things. We had our different views and stuff, and it was just usually, and just in good jest. The only thing why it only lasted as long as we could is it was just a traveling issue for discussions, and even with work, I had some other projects that came brought aboard, and I thought I can't be able to keep up with this place, and I thought to myself, gosh, if I even had a girlfriend even into my life and the relationship now, it just even makes it even more tougher for me on this situation. But I thought, I figured the best timing for me to doing it was at that time, was during that Super Bowl, at the end of the Super Bowl, because we started before the beginning of the NFL season. I figured it'd be just almost fitting that we ended at the end of the NFL season on the championship game, as we did for as long as it did. So I always greatly appreciated it at the time.
And I do plan on inviting Keith to do this podcast as well. He was instrumental in helping me find a post-Rams team to be a fan of. And I still remember discussion right after that move happened. We did it over the phone, and I was pretty pissed off.
Oh yeah, and you're still mad. So I mean, it's
Yep.
that's not surprising and stuff like that. I mean, Cleveland Browns fans can kind of relate to you in the same way. So I mean, it's understandable.
I've said this before. I'll say it again. It got to the point where I was more interested in what was happening with the lawsuits than it was with actual football on the field. Mm-hmm. Another thing that came out of all this was, again, going back to the promotion relegation thing in soccer, bringing me to semi-pro soccer locally. And
Yeah.
just spent the last weekend all day Sunday at Swope Park watching nothing but local teams, including the team I'm supporting, Santa Fe Wanderers. I just see them they actually won that tournament, and right after the game they got me and to a photo with them. It was really really great. Everyone had a good time, but yeah, there were definitely some interesting stories. You contributed some interesting stories to the podcast as well.
I try to put as many try to put some unique stories and aspects from like from a history standpoint, fact standpoint. Try to even put some games, involved in it too, just for fun, because we try to, when we were doing the podcast, we wanted to make it fun, we wanted to make it interesting, we want to make it to the point where it's like could it be really really enjoyable. And it was, I mean, even when you try to put the hard work into trying to put all these interesting things together, it was just like, man, I didn't realize how much work it really takes involved to put in this stuff. It's one thing when you can just scroll down on the computer, and then you can just do, and I do the computer thing, but I'm more of the handwritten notes and stuff like that, because I like it right there in front of my face, where I can see it. I think that's more when my dad was a Sunday school teacher. He always would have notes, writing down, and I think I took a lot of that stuff from what my dad did, from writing notes. Oh, so when I have it's prepared for me. It's ready to go, and it's like, bang! I can just go up, search the information, and it's right there in front of me, and I don't have my computer to have to crash down. That's why sometimes when I hear these sports talk radio guys and they're doing throwing out all these stats and everything else, of course they got a computer in front of them. But what if the computer goes down? Then what are you going to talk about stuff? Do you have your notes, up in front of you,
Well, nowadays too, their microphones, their recording equipment is all computers too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So not only do they not have their notes in front of them, they don't have any way of recording what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you when you're getting yourself this is why I have the notes prepared for it, because after all, there's nothing's going to happen to the notes unless the fire comes and burns it down right out of my hands, So that at least I'm there prepared up for it. I mean, this is why the people, when they're reading the news updates, they've got pieces of paper written ready up in front of them. There's nothing going to go wrong with anything on But when you're doing the sports talk, when you're doing the stats and everything, you better have the notes, or otherwise you're going to be like totally lost. Now, I haven't heard it from like a mistake standpoint, but you know what? These guys are so much professionals out there. It's probably happened to them multiple times, and they just roll with the punches.
Well, in TV they have teleprompters.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was in the TV news business for 5 years, so I know that experience.
Yeah. As do I. So, yeah. Yeah, I was always during my internship there, in between Silpada and starting the podcasts, was my internship, and the pleasure of working behind the camera that Nick Haynes was reading off of. That was pretty cool. And I recall at the time everyone was like, "You gotta be careful working with Nick, because he had a reputation of moving around." I did. I never noticed that, and I never had any problems working with Nick. So,
I think, and I've seen Nick before, on a few occasions. he is British, right? You know, I mean, I love his accent. You know, I mean, that's what makes it. It's almost like I want him to always say, "I would like to have a spot of tea with you," you know, something like. I mean, but he seemed like the real friendly British guy that you just kind of want to hang out and have a beer with. You know, I mean, just a real super. Cool. I'm sure you've got plenty of stories about him that you can.
Well, the first time I ever met Nick, he was like, you know, we only talk about local stuff on this station, right? But yeah, very nice gentleman. One of my favorite stories from the internship, does involve Nick. He gave me a hard time for not wearing Johnson County Community College stuff the early part of my internship. So one day I relent, buy a JUCO sweatshirt and wear it into the internship on a Friday.
Yeah.
Which is when they tape Weekend Review. They tape that in the morning and then air it later that evening, and then over the weekend. So Nick knows, hey, you finally wore the shirts. Trying to do Welsh, but it's not well.
Yeah.
He is from Wales.
Yeah.
So, and I recall the Weekend Review. It was with a certain former governor who shall remain nameless. And I was having some technical issues with my camera. And then afterwards, we were told, stick around because we're going to come back and do something for the local show. And I went around, I look in the lobby, and the governor's people are giving Nick the business. Which about a month later, I would learn, they're saying, you guys are biased, we're not coming back, that sort of thing. So we go to lunch, we went to McCoy's, another place that unfortunately closed recently, or is in the process of closing. And I'm apologizing profusely for my camera mistakes. And everything. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It happens to the best of us. And then we come back, and it's Kai Kamara that we're interviewing for the local show. He was with Sporting KC at the time. And it's Nick doing the interview, because I guess it's an unwritten rule. If you're going to be talking about soccer, bring in the British person.
Yeah, bring in the British person.
And Nick comes in. He's a little surprised to see me behind camera. He's like, well, I noticed that the governor didn't shake our hands. I was like, Nick, don't worry about it. And then, I thought I would have liked to meet someone who possibly vegged for him. Knowing me at all, you know I would never support that particular individual for dog catcher, let alone governor.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I voted for Holland, who was the loser in that particular race. And slight pause, and Nick says, oh, so you're the one. Laughter all around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, Kai Kamara, very nice guy. So I believe that's the second time on just this podcast we brought up Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah.
Which
I'm planning to try to get to a Sporting KC game. I've only been to once, and I was in part of it was a sold out game. I was in part of the standing room only crowd, but I said I'm going to try to get there again this summer, for at least another soccer game, because it's actually really a fun venue out there at the Legends, for going to Sporting KC. The toughest part, just trying to find a parking spot, out in that area, but
they use the racetrack parking for that.
Well, the racetrack parking. It used to not be, unless of course they've recently just changed it. Because it used to be the only parking spaces that you had was either at Nebraska Furniture Mart, the Legends outlet parking, or you would use the T-Bones. But the problem was, if the T-Bones were going on at the same time as the Legends, you would be in some serious trouble, because it's like finding a parking spot was like a nightmare if both the teams were playing on at the same day. Going to Sporting KC game, it's fun. We actually had a Sporting KC moment during our podcast. I don't know if you remember this or not. It was I think it was either one of our first times or one of our last times. I think it might have been the first times we went to a Missouri Mavericks Central hockey game. and we were there for the hockey game. But at the same night that was going on, Sporting KC was playing in the championship game for the MLS soccer, and we're right there watching the game at the bar there at the arena, and we were just cheering because it was like a shootout going on between the two teams, and that was one of the most exciting soccer games I've ever been. I mean, I've seen some ones with the World Cup, that were really good too. But just one with the local flavor with Sporting KC, that was the most insane cheering that we had just at the local bar there at the arena. And I'd never been so excited. It's like, wow, they pulled it off, But yeah, that was definitely a highlight, on mentioning up on Sporting KC since you mentioned that.
And the day we were recording this, in fact, the minute we're recording this, Championship playoff final in England, Aston Villa, Derby County. Winner goes to the Premier League next year. Okay. Up the Villa.
Yeah.
All right. As it turned out, Aston Villa won that game that we mentioned 2-1, and will be playing in the Premier League for the 2019-2020 season. So, here's what you can do to help this podcast out. First and foremost, tell your friends about it. And subscribe to the podcast. Check out our blog, uncalledfor.home.blog. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/uncalledforpodcast. And if you want to contribute financially to the podcast for just $5, I will gladly mention your name on the podcast. To do that, go to my Patreon page, patreon.com/Mike Chernevsky. patreon.com/MikeCzerniewski, all one word. And just $5, you get to hear your name on this podcast. So, with all that said, have a great day. We will talk to you next time.
This podcast is Uncalled For is hosted, produced, and edited by Mike Chernevsky. Opening music is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Outro music is Crossing the Desert provided by freestockmusic.com. Additional music included Morocco Sting by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license, and The Lord of Evil provided by freestockmusic.com. If you would like to support this podcast or any of Mike's other creative endeavors, please consider making a donation at patreon.com/Mike Chernevsky. That's MikeCzerniewski. Donations over $5 will receive a special thanks on a future podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.